All right, so let's go over 1724 and 1725. As I said, I think that's going to give you guys a good understanding about what to do and where to put the information. I think that's where a lot of you who have done it and have turned it in or have me review it, that's where you guys were getting hooked up. Yeah, was 24 and 25. So let's take a look at those two problems. They are on page, where is it? 698 in your book. So we have 24. We have weighted average method assigning costs. So in the weighted average method, what are we doing? We're just basically grouping everything together and then getting an average price, right? First in, first out is when we take the first costs that were in there in the previous and then apply those costs first. But in weighted average, we just look at everything at once. So we have Tomlinson Corporation is a biotech company based in, I have no clue. It makes a cancer treatment drug in a single processing department. The direct materials are added at the start of the process. Conversion costs are added evenly during the process. Process costing. So that's where we're going to start off at. We have work in process as of July 1st, 8,700 units. The equivalent units is 87 for direct. Conversion cost is 2175. We started 34,500. We completed and transferred out 32,000. I'm sorry, just 34. Yeah. And then work in process at the end of the month was 11,200. We have direct materials equivalent unit, all of them are 11,200, and then the conversion cost of 78. So what we need to do here is just first of all plug those numbers into our chart. So work in process, which was given, which is the 8,700. We have that started during the month is 34,500, so that we have to account for the sum of those two numbers. So we take the 8,700 and the 34,500, add them together, get 43,200. Okay. Now it says we completed 3,200 or 32,000. Well, if you complete 32,000, what does that tell me about the equivalent units for the direct materials and the conversion cost? If I complete them, they're all there, right? So I'm going to have 32,000 units for direct materials and conversion cost of 32,000. My ending work in process is going to be 11,200. And so I have to account for a total of 4,300 and 200. Okay? Now, in the information there, it says degree of completion of the work in process is 100% for direct materials and 70% for conversion costs. Okay, so what does that mean? What do I do with the direct materials?
100% of the money.
Yeah, it's 100% of the 11,200. Now, what about the conversion costs? It says the degree of completion, direct materials 100%, conversion cost is 70%. Yeah. So I'm going to take that 11,200 and multiply it by 70%, and that gives me the 78,40. Does everybody understand how we got that number? You have to pay attention to what percentage they're saying is completed to be able to get that number. Does everybody see where I got that information?
So we got it here on B, but why would you use the A?
Because the A is not applied, it's applied to the physical units at the beginning, the equivalent units at the beginning. But on this particular problem, on 24, we don't care about that per se, because we only care about, because we're weighted average. Okay? So that A applies to the working process at the beginning of the month. So, and I don't really care about that. I just care about the what I started and then what's still there. Or what I completed and what's still there. Okay? So if I add those, my equivalent units for direct materials is going to be 43,200. And then for the conversion costs, I add the 32,000 and the 7840, and I get 39,480. Okay, so that's going to drive my cost per unit in the next part of this. Okay, any questions on that so far? All right. So now the work in process down here. What does it tell me about this stuff? Well, my work in process is given at the beginning of the month. My direct materials is what? Anybody?
61,500.
Yeah, the 61,500. My conversion costs are what? 43,200. And so if I add those together, I have a total of the work in process at 104,700. Now, how much did I add during the period? Well, close. Well, we add both of those.
Both of those.
Yeah, so we have 301 to 380 plus the 498, 624, and that gives me the 804, 704.
But on your little template there, would you put a cost adding right here under each one of those?
Yes.
Processing?
What do you mean, 904,
904. All right, so we want to put in the individual amounts for direct materials at 301, 380, and then conversion costs for added costs of 498, 624. So what I have to allocate is the 362, 880 for direct materials and conversion costs of 541, 824. Now, the one thing that I saw on some of your FIFO and the weighted average. The weighted average, what I am going to allocate is the full 362 and the full 541 on weighted average. If this was first in, first out, then my rate per unit is only based on the current costs. Okay, does everybody understand that? Weighted average, I add everything together and I'm weighting the average. I'm averaging out all the costs, including what's already in there with what I add. But we'll see here in a few minutes when we do first in, first out, and this is where I saw a couple of the issues at, was on first in, first out, the first line on my amounts here down at the bottom is going to be that 61,005 and 43.2, and my average per unit is determined by the 301 and the 498 in first in, first out. But in weighted average, I add those two together, and then I do the division part. So, and the cost incurred to date will be the full 362 and the 541. Oops, I went too far. See, I'm trying to make this for first in, first out. Now, the equivalent units I get from where? Where do I get those equivalent units? Yep, the 43.2 for the direct materials and the 38 or 39,840 for the conversion costs. Okay, then how do I get the cost per unit? How do you get cost per unit?
Divide the 43, and the 362, and the same thing with 39 and 541.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you dividing?
I'm dividing the 362 by the 43.2. 300, that's my total cost by the number of units, gives me the cost per unit. Okay?
So did you want to do that one, or did that matter?
It's there, you just don't know it's there.
Yeah, but it doesn't want to.
No, as long as I know it's there. Don't round it here. Okay? Meaning that, you know, that even though it only shows 8, you can move it and I'll see the 0.4 and the 0.6. Okay? All right, so now, what do I have to do next? So here's where I care about this information here. All right? I have to allocate this 904. So basically this number here is going to match this number here. I have to allocate this $362,000 to completed and work in process. I have to allocate this 541,824 between completed and work in process. And so how do I do that? It's driven by the equivalent units for each one of these. So what I'm going to do is take the 32,000, okay, equivalent units times the rate right here. And that's how I come up with 268. And I'm going to do the same thing for the conversion costs. I'm going to take the 32,000 times the 1360. So now if I add these together, my transferred out cost is 704. Okay, does everybody see that? Yes.
So you're multiplying the 30,000 times.
Yeah, I'm taking the equivalent units from above here for each one of these. So this is the completed line. This is the first line here is the completed. Okay, the second line is the work in process. So I take those equivalent units, multiply it by the cost per equivalent unit here, and that gives me how much to allocate of the 362 to the completed work. Okay, does everybody see that? And then I do the same thing for the work in process. This time I'm going to use the 11,200 times the same rate. And I'm going to get that of 94,080. And then if I add these two together, I should get the 362,880. So that's how it ties out. Does everybody see how we did that? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. And so the same concept over here for the conversion cost, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the equivalent units of 32,000, multiply it by the 1380 to get my completed work. Then I have equivalent units of 7840, and I'm going to multiply that by the 1360. I said 1380 earlier, I'm sorry. It's 1360, and that's how I get the 104,624. Okay? Now, if I add these together, then this number here has to equal the total cost to account for. Okay? Then over here, what I do, I add straight across, and this number, the total cost to account for, needs to equal that number up here. Okay? So this number here, we're tying everything this section is here is what you have to allocate. And so this number down here has to match this number. So 362,880 has to match 362,880. 541,824 has to match 541,824. 904,704, 904,704. Okay? Any questions on that? How do you guys feel about that? Good, bad, and different? All right, so now the different one here on 25, does it use the same information? Yes, it uses the same information. But here's the thing is, the difference is we do the same part, 8,700, 34,500, 43,200, okay? So I still have to account for the 87, the 34,500, and the total units of 43,200. Now, how do I do this? The first thing I have from beginning work in process, well, we have completed, transferred out. So how much did I complete and transferred out? Okay. Well, it says that we completed a total of 3,200. So first in, first out tells me which ones go out first. the 8,700, okay? So we have the 8,700 there, let's see, I'm sorry, 8,700 there, and then started and completed would be the difference between the 32,000, I'm sorry, oh yeah, that was right, and the 23,300, or okay, so we had a total units, 8,700 was in work in process, we added 34,500. We sold 32,000, okay, does everybody understand? We sold 32,000.
Where'd you get the 23,300 at?
That's what I'm about to say. Okay, we have to have 32,000. So these two are what we sell. First in, first out tells me what? I have to take the 8,700 first, right? I sold that doesn't give me up to 32,000. So I take 32,000 minus the 8,700. So I'm taking 23,300 of the 34,500 as part of my completed. Okay, so let me break that out so you guys see what I'm talking about. So we had 32,000 that needs to come out. We sold, right? The first ones I take out is the 37. So that tells me that I have to have 23,000 of the total of 34,500 in. So the work in process and ending would be what?
32,000.
Huh? No, not 32,000.
1,200.
Yeah, how did you get that 11,200? Well, how much do I have to account for?
It was what was left over after taking the 87 and the 23.
Yeah. Okay, so what I have to account for is 43,200, right? If I take the first 8,700, okay, that's gone. I sold another 23,300, what's left over? So I take the 43 minus the 8,007.
So
Minus
should
the
the 8,700 be up in line?
No, I actually have an extra line there.
Should 32,000 be there?
Hmm? You can put 32,000 there. Well, no, there shouldn't be a line there. There should not be a line there. Okay, that's my fault, I apologize. So then we know how much do we account for? We account for the full 43,200. Okay? Now, here is where you were asking about the 25, the part A, right? And this is where we care about that. So, first of all, we deal with the equivalent units for 8,700. Well, what did they tell us about direct materials? That's already allocated, right? So I don't have any equivalent units of direct materials for the 8,700 because that was taken care of beforehand. Okay? Now, here's where part A and the information provided goes into. They say from the beginning work in process, 25% of that has already been converted or has already been put into use, the money. All right, so what do I have to add to the pot? 75%. All right, so I'm going to take that 87 times the 75%. Yeah, you got to pay attention to which ones. That was another person who had me look at theirs. They did the 70%, so they did the 30% here.
Well, yeah, I did the 70% first, I think. Or no, I did 25%, and then you said that it should have been 75.
Yeah.
So last statement or whatever was done, only 25% of the cost was accounted for there.
Yeah.
This time we have to account for the rest of it to make sure that it.
Yes, exactly.
So the next one that we would do.
Then the next one, like if we went to the next month, we would, use that information in part B.
And do 30.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So they say we had already accounted for 25% the previous period. we still have to count for 75% of this period. So we have to multiply the equivalent unit, or the units, times the 75%, that gives me the 6525. Okay, now, completed and started, what does that mean?
23,300 all the way across.
Yeah, all of it goes, right? And then we use, again, the second part of that information, part B. Part B says what? For direct materials, it's 100%. So all units are accounted for in my direct materials. Now, it says for the conversion cost, how much of the conversion costs are accounted for? 70%. So what I'm going to do is take that 11,200 and multiply it by 70%. Okay? And then I add those three numbers together, the 0, 23.3, and 11.2. And so for direct materials, I have equivalent units of 34,500. And then conversion costs, I have equivalent units of 37,665. Does everybody understand how we calculated the equivalent units on these particular items? Yes, no, or maybe?
Evidence I did before.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a learning process, so you gotta go with the flow. All right. So now we get to allocate all the money. So what do we have here? Again, we have beginning work of process of what? The direct materials of 61.5 and 43,200. And so if I add those two numbers together, I get 104,700. So that didn't change, right?
That
What-
was my average.
Yeah. We also added 301,380 and 498,624. That doesn't change, right? So the top part does not change at all. What changes?
Where did you get the? Okay, never mind.
So the top part, what we have to account for, does not change at all. That did not change. What changes here is costs incurred to date. Now, why does that change? I don't care about the 61.5 and I don't care about the 43. Because I know that because of first in, first out, I know that those numbers are going to be applied first off at the top. All right. What I base my equivalent unit my cost per equivalent unit is only those costs added during the period. All right. Not the cost from a previous period, but only the costs added to the group this period. So costs incurred to date that we care about is the 301 and the 498. That's what I base my average on, or my cost per unit. So in weighted average, I take everything, right? I'm averaging everything together. And first in, first out, that's not the case. I only take what was added during the period, okay? Does everybody understand that? Yes, no, maybe. So we do the same concept. We have 34.5 and equivalent units of 37,665. And I'm going to take the 301 divided by the 34.5. And so we're a little bit different than what we were before. If you look on 24, we have 840 and 1630 for the first in, first, or for the weighted average. For first in, first out, you have $8.74 and $13.24.
Take it to 345 times 70%, right?
No. Yeah. Cost per unit. So I'm going to take 301, 380
Yeah.
divided by the 34.5, which is what I got from the equivalent units up here.
Okay, so 301 divided by 34.
Yeah. And then the 498, which is what we added, this line right here, what we added, divided by the equivalent units, is the $13.24.
So the bottom part's gonna be basically, we'll do everything the same way we did the weighted cost, but we're only using those numbers now, so, right?
Yes, but we have to add the first line of cost for them first. The first line of cost is going to be this one ending the work in process, which is going to be, remember, first in, first out would be what was in work in process before we started. The 61,500 and the 43,200. Okay? Oops, that's not gonna work. Okay, so first in, first out, the first thing I put down is the cost that was already in the bucket. Okay? Yeah. All right, so I take whatever was in work in process at the beginning, and that's my first line, because that's the first items that are out. And then I do what we did before. I'm going to take the rate times the equivalent unit of each one of those. So added cost during the process, what am I going to do here? I'm just going to take the rate, the 874, times the equivalent units of up there. And then, ooh, that really messed up, didn't it? Why did it say plus there? I plussed it. I multiplied it. Okay. That's a crazy number, isn't it? Yeah. It is a 0. I just don't have a formula ready. Okay. All right. So there's the first one. That's the cost added for the work. Then started and completed. I'm going to take the 23.3 to multiply it by the 874. And then I'm going to take, for the ending work in process, I'm going to take the 11.2 times the 874. Okay? Now, if I add all 4 of these together, what number should I equal?
23,309.
Mm-hmm. Did I add it wrong again?
But it adds.
See, I want to add. Okay. Okay.
So which numbers did you add for that?
Okay. So what are you talking about? The 362?
No, the 035.
Okay. So what I did there was I took. Let me scroll up for you. All right. So these equivalent units. So the first line here, the 61, is what was in the bucket before we started, right? And then the rest of the cost, the 301, 380, is allocated based on the equivalent units. Okay? So we take the rate that we determined, $8.74. We multiply it by the 0, which is 0, right?
Yeah.
874 times 23.3, 874 times 11.20, 200, 11,200. Okay? You just take the rate times all these 3 numbers up here, the equivalent units. And then that allocates this 301 between finished goods, or the beginning, the finished goods, and the ending.
So the 203 is just the 874 times the 23.
Yeah,
And the 11.
yeah. It's times the 23,300 is the 203,540.
So 18.
So I took this 874.
Okay, so just the 23.3 times 874. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I do that the exact same thing to the conversion cost. So basically what that tells me is for my ending work in process, I have $61,000 worth, $61,500 worth of direct materials, and all the direct materials were already accounted for, so that's how I got 0, right? Well, I had equivalent units of conversion costs. We determined that earlier. So we originally take the 43.2 that was in there we know of, and then based on the number of units, equivalent units, that percentage of that 498 goes into my beginning working process. So these two lines are the costs for the beginning working process. Okay? And then we have the started and completed. Well, what do I do that? So basically what I'm doing is allocating the portion that goes to that 23,300 of the, and allocating it to started and completed. I'm allocating the 598,624 to started and completed. Okay? And then I'm taking the equivalent units multiplied by the rate to allocate the rest of whatever's left over to ending inventory.
So how did you get that number?
Huh?
How did you get the number 97?
The 97, I took the rate 874 times the equivalent units of what is in the ending inventory.
11.2.
Yeah. The 11.2.
And then stick everything go over and add up to
Mm-hmm.
So with the one right next to it from the first cost, you just take the 1524 times the 7840.
The 7840. Yeah. So basically now, if I just add all these costs together, I get extra lines in there. Okay.
So the 6155, 203, 97, all added to the increase.
Yeah.
And then
So yeah, all these numbers, all 4 of these numbers has to equal to 362. All 4 of these numbers have to equal to 541. And then of course, cross that 90474, that has to equal the total production costs. I'm just spreading all those costs over the 3 rooms, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay. Any questions on that one?
up at the top where you have the 0
Yes.
direct materials. That's just because we used all 100% on the last thing.
Yes.
So that's why it's 0. That was 75%. That's what we used 25 on the last.
Yeah, because remember what did the A say? It said 100% had already been allocated and 75 or 25% had already been allocated. So 100%, that means I don't have anything left over to allocate. So nothing is added for direct materials. But with the 75%, I have to add the remaining 25%.
So when we see these A and B's sitting here, A is usually the month before, B is this month.
It depends, but yeah, you can pretty well say yes, but you got to just make sure where you have to look and see where their A is applying to.
All right, I see.
Okay.
I'm with you.
All right. Any questions on that? So how do you guys feel about equivalent units? Equivalent units and allocating costs in between different things, different buckets. So remember, average cost, we add it all together and didn't do the average. And then first in, first out, I only care about what? I care about what I added. And that's how I base my average on.
You do like those on still look at it.
Yeah. Well, you would, what goes out first would be what was put in, and then what was left over would be what you would allocate. Yeah. Okay. Questions on those? So, as I said, I had a few that come, not in this class, but the other class. I had a few that sent to me for review, and I saw that this is where they were having issues at. The rest of it was pretty cut and dry. If you can understand this, you'll understand all the rest of the homework problems before this.
They're
So,
comprehensive almost.
yes, there was a comprehensive. And the comprehensive, let's take a quick look at the comprehensive one. I don't think it was a, okay, yeah, the comprehensive problem, basically you're given a scenario of an artist and you have to determine, and they give you all the information about her costs and things like that. And you got to tell me, should she use a job order or process costing system, and why? List the individual types of costs will incur in providing. So you got to group their costs in direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing or overhead. You know, and then how could she estimate her overhead rate per portrait when she doesn't know the number of portraits she will draw in a month? And then you have to address, will she have labor costs and why or why not she had labor costs. So you're really not doing like calculations per se on this comprehensive problem. You're just basically, analyzing the information. Yeah. Okay.
Is that the only part? Is that the only?
Yeah, that's the only thing of the comprehensive problem. Yeah. Okay. And I don't want to see, she should use process costing. I want to see why should she support your decision. Okay. That's the big thing. Support your decision. I mean, you could go either way, whatever, but I want to know why you went to that way. All right, that's the key. I want to know why you went that way. Okay. I think this was worth 30 points. 20 points. I tried.
You could give us the extra.
Yeah, so this is really an easy 20 points. I mean, if you address every single question and give me good background to it, then you'll get the points. So, okay. Midterms did go out last week, so okay. If you guys turn in all your homework, address all the problems, then you'll get your points. I don't grade the homework based on right or wrong. I grade the homework based on completion. And you'll see, I'll mark it, and then you can look at the answer key to figure out what you had wrong or why you got something wrong. And of course, in class, we can go over it too. So, okay. Questions on that? Yes, no, maybe? All right. All right, so that being said, week 9. So let's go over week 9 here. Session 9. Just so you know, session 9 today, we'll be reviewing for the test next week. So basically we're going to review every chapter, go over, parts of the test or what's going to be on the test next week. And then session 11 is a test here in class. I think the syllabus does say take home test, but you'll be taking, this is your home for the test.
Today we're doing 5.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And then after that, we're going to do service department allocation, joint cost allocation, capital, and then we got basically 3 more weeks of class time after that, and then review, and then final. So, not too bad, is it? No? Okay. So let's look and see what's going on today. So today what we're going to be doing is chapter 5. So here again, the archives lectures, I'm recording this right now. So this will be up on my YouTube video. I'll post the link here. The lectures that are already there are from last semester. I did a PowerPoint. Basically, you just see the PowerPoint and I talk. Okay. And then, of course, the PowerPoints are under this one too. So you can print off the PowerPoints from here under lectures, archive lectures. Okay? Right there. There's the PowerPoints and then the lecture. That will link you to my YouTube video. Then, your homework assignment, we have the ABC problem. And basically, you just do what we've been doing on those. And then that just gives you, now on 520, you only need to complete 1 and 2. Okay? So you have 520 and 525 in the book. Only complete 1 and 2 in 520. Problem 615 is what I just pulled up here. Is the ABC problem right here. And then, of course, your worksheet. You know, I give you all the information that you just need to plug in the numbers on it, okay? Very similar to what we've done already, all right? Any questions on that? We'll go over that here in a little bit once we get done. And again, it's due next week. And then you'll get the answer keys next week. All right? All right, any questions before we get to the lecture? Do you guys want to take a break now, or you just want to keep on going? Just roll? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's only 32 slides on this one, so I don't think it's going to take a whole lot. Yeah. All right, so in chapter 5, chapter 5 is ABC costing. And so what we're going to be doing is we are going to be analyzing, a company is trying to decide between 2 items. What is the best way to, produce 2 different items? I think in the book it's lens covers, and I wish a missing person was here because this is similar to what she does. So this would really tie into her job. So, but unfortunately, she's on vacation. So explain how broad averaging under cost and over cost products or services. Present 3 guidelines for refining the costing system. We're going to distinguish between simple and activity-based costing systems. Describe a 4-part cost hierarchy and cost products or services using activity-based costing. So ABC costing is actually activity-based costing. Okay. We're also going to evaluate the costs and benefits of implementing activity-based costing systems, explain how managers use activity-based systems in activity-based management, and compare activity-based costing systems and department costing systems. So a little bit of background. Now, recall that plant overhead is applied to production in a rational, systematic manner, using some type of averaging. There is a variety of methods to accomplish this goal. These methods often involve trade-offs between simplicity and realism. We have the simple methods, which can be inaccurate, and then complex methods that are usually more accurate. So basically what we're talking about here is that we pretty much we group all the costs together into a pool, and then we take based on maybe machine hours or square footage or something like that, and we allocate those costs over the units themselves, right? And so very simple, very easy to do, but sometimes it might not be inaccurate. It might be inaccurate. So the more complex systems gets a little bit more detail, but of course, what does that mean? A little bit more time consuming, right? And costly to do. So now, how do we determine the plant overhead rate? We take the total estimated overhead divided by the total estimated base. Now, how do we do that? The base can be direct labor hours, machine hours. It could be square footage. of the department. Just that's a manager's role to determine how am I going to allocate it. What is the best driver of my cost? Is it machine hours? Is it labor hours? Is it square footage? Things like that. So that's how we get the total estimated base. The rate is used to allocate overhead costs to all products.
So how do you know what your total estimated basis is? Tell you what that is, what you're using.
Yeah. So basically, when you start off at the beginning of the year, you're going to say, okay, we are going to produce 20,000 cars. Okay. And based on, you know your history, how many machine, or him, if you say, okay, I'm going to base this off direct labor hours, and it usually takes maybe 5 hours per car to build. Okay, so that would be 5 hours times 20,000. So my base would be 100,000 hours. Okay, so it depends, and again, it's based on history. And you, at the beginning, you'll determine, okay, this is what we're planning to do, and you kind of back into the numbers. You say, okay, I'm going to do 20,000 cars. It takes me 5 hours to do one car, so I know I'm going to have 100,000 labor hours, and that's how you get your base. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, of course, you estimate your overhead. Okay, you look at the different components of your overhead. You have insurance, you have taxes, you have utilities, and you always do, and you're estimating, okay, this is what it cost me last year. Rates are going up a little bit, so this is what it probably will cost me this year. It's just like your everyday budgeting. If you're doing a budget, what are you doing? You're estimating, how much are you going to spend on food? How much are you going to spend on gas? Yes, you might estimate $150 in gas for the month, but hey, guess what? Prices are going down. So what does that mean? You might not hit that 150. Or when prices go up, what happens? You probably might go over that 150. But it's an estimate. It's what based on history. I know I average $150 in gas every month. So that's what I'm basing my budget off of. And then you make adjustments. Okay? All right. So let's talk about A and B. So we have Department A and Department B with overhead costs of $300 and $450. We might use different bases for each department. In our example, we'll use the direct labor hours for Department A and machine hours for Department B. So each department could be driven by its own thing. So maybe machine hours would be the production aspect of the thing, and Department B could be the inspection part. Okay, production would be more driven by machine hours, wouldn't it? Okay, inspection would be more driven by personal hours or labor hours. Okay, so let's write this down so we have this note. We have Department A, and we have Department B. And it says in Department A will be direct labor hours. And Department B would be machine hours. Okay? All right. So, oh wait, we have 300,000 in A and 450 B. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So let's take a look. We have total hours of A. So in A, what are we basing our rate on? And A is direct labor hours. So in A, do I really care about the machine hours? No. Okay. So my rate in A, I'm going to take that 300,000. I'm going to divide it by the direct labor hours of 8,000. And what do I get?
Where'd you get those numbers?
They were just given to us. They were provided to us. Okay. And so what's 300 divided by 8? Anybody can help me out here?
What did you say?
300 divided by 8. I got 3.1. I'm sorry? 37.5? $37.50 per hour. Okay? So I take the 300,000, I divide it by the 8,000 labor hours, and so I get $37.50 per hour. Okay? That's labor hour. I don't care about the machine hours for department now. Now, on B, what do? I take the 450, and on B, since it's driven by machine hours, I don't care about the direct labor hours. All I care about is the machine hours. So I'm going to take that 450 divided by 1,200, and what do I get on that one? $3.75. 375. I'm really low. Per machine hour. Okay, so in department A, my overhead rate is going to be $37.50 per labor hour. In this department B, it's based on machine hours, so my rate is going to be $375 per machine hour. Does everybody see what we did there? Now, if you go here, and of course that gives us that information, okay? I wanted to show you how to figure it without seeing it before you see how I came up with that number. Does everybody understand? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Now, if we did a plant-wide rate, what would happen? If we based it off of direct labor hours, what would I do? I would take the total, the 750, which is the total overhead for both departments, divided by the total direct labor. Now, the total direct labor hours was 15,000, and so I would get $50 per direct labor hour. Okay. Whereas if I dropped it off at machine hours, there's a total of 950, and so it'd be 384.62. Okay. From this simple comparison, we see that product using more Department A resources would be severely overcosted. So let's look at Department A here. We have, if we based it off of everything in the entire company, what is my overhead rate? It's $50, isn't it? But if I drill down to a particular department, what happens to my overhead rate? It goes down, right? And so what I'm doing here is I'm getting more specific by the department, which helps me control my costs. All right? Because right now, if I did it over everything, I would be over allocating. When I should have only been allocating $37.50, I'm actually, by looking at the whole big picture, I would be allocating $50. Yeah, on the machine hours, I'm under allocating. Okay? Machine hour. Yeah, you would, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Now, if we were basing the single rate on machine hours and a product using more Department B resources would be severely undercosted if we use direct labor hours as the base for the single rate. So it's better, basically it's better to be able to drill down because you're allocating based on what that department uses. Because if I use more B than A, I could get hurt, and vice versa. So it helps me if I drill down to better allocate those costs. Okay. All right. Now, broad averaging. Historically, firms produce a limited variety of goods, and at the same time, their indirect costs were relatively small. Allocating overhead costs was simple. Use broad averages to allocate costs uniformly, regardless of how they actually occurred. It's called the peanut butter costing, because basically you're taking, the amount and spreading it over evenly. You know how you use the knife and spread the peanut butter on your bread? You're spreading it over evenly. Same concept. In the result, products using fewer resources are overcosted, and products using more resources are undercosted. So you're spreading the cost over everything, and things that don't use those resources could get hurt, meaning they're getting too much of the allocation of the costs, whereas things that are using the most resources are getting too little of the cost. So that's the big downfall. That's why we want to do ABC costing, so that we can more allocate better to the different costs. Does everybody understand that concept? Okay? All right. Now, what is overcosting? Basically, what that is a product that consumes a low level of resources that allocated a higher cost per unit. So say if I'm doing it at a production room and a inspection room. Now, the inspection room, does it have any machine hours? Probably not, And so if I base it off of that, I could be hurting production or the inspection, because basically I'm giving them too much of my cost if I based it on machine hours. Whereas if I based it on labor hours in the production room, I could be hurting them, right? So under costing is the product consumes a high level of resources, but it's allocated low cost per unit. So over costing means I'm allocating too much to the resource. Okay? Under costing means that I am not allocating enough to the resource. Over too much, under is too little.
Would you rather overcost a little bit so you lose that?
Overcosting will cause you to, it's really, overcosting would mean that your costs are higher, and so you have to charge a higher price. Then, of course, undercosting, what would that happen? You don't charge enough. And that's the example that we're going to be talking about talks about. They discover in the example that the thing that they thought was making them the money wasn't making them the money that they thought, and they were actually not charging enough for the lens that they thought was the better lens. So, okay. And what is cross-subsidization? If one product is under-costed, then at least one other product must be over-costed. The overcost product absorbs too much cost, making it seem less profitable than it really is. And undercosted products is left with too low cost, making it more profitable than it really is. So basically what happens here is you take away from one, you have to give to the other, right? And so, like we'll see in our example, they are putting more costs on the lower end product when they should have been putting more costs on the higher end product. And so they were under allocating costs for the higher end, over allocating costs for the lower end. And so, it balances out, but it hurts you. You want to try to get as close as you can so that you can make sure you're charging the right price for your products. All right, so consider this. If you were using cost to determine price, what effect would this have? Cross-subsidization. If I have two products, product A and product B, and I over-allocated in product A, under-allocated in product B. So what would happen to A? If I over allocated to A, what happens to my expenses?
You charge too much.
Yeah, okay. So my expenses would be higher than they should be. Then I would have to charge too much for that product. Then, in order to make profit, right? Exactly. Mhm. But on the other end, if I have product B where I undercost, then what happens with that case? I don't charge enough, therefore I'm selling a lot more because I'm probably below market, right? And so I'm hurting myself because I'm selling a lot at a price that's not correct. Okay? Product A, I'm not selling hardly anything because the price is too high, and product B, I'm selling too much because the price is too low. Okay? So if you were looking at product profitability, determine market focus, if you were looking at product profitability to determine market focus, what would result? As we said, the product A would be overpriced, so we wouldn't sell enough. Product B would be underpriced, so we'd sell too much. So let's take a look at a previous example. So Department A was $37.50. Department B is $375. The plant rate would be $50 and $384. So we incur 1,000 labor hours for each department, 40 in Department A and 40 in Department, or 75 in Department B. Okay? So let's look at these numbers here. Job, let's look at Department A. So in Department A, what would be my rate if I did it based on direct labor hours? I would take the $37.50, right? And I multiply it by my direct labor hours of 1,000. Okay, so that would be what? $37.50. Yeah. There we go. One more. Sorry. Okay, so if I base that on my direct labor hours, I got $37,000 in cost. But if I did it based on the whole thing, what would I have? $50,000 in cost. That's a lot. That's a huge difference, isn't it? That little bit had that big department. Now, in Department B, we based on labor hours, right? So what would happen? We take the 75 times the 375, which we should have, or the 75 by everything. Okay? So let's look at this next screen. That's going to give us our numbers prettier look. All right, so I take the 1,000 times the 37. My Department A would, based on the direct labor hours, would be $37,500. The 75 in Department B, 375, $28,125. So if I do it based on departments, I would only have a cost of $65,625. Now, if I based it on just direct labor hours, they had a total of $2,000 direct labor hours, $50, I would way over cost, right? So this one is broken down based on departments. So I would have $37,500 in direct A, $28,125 in Department B, for a total cost of $65,625. That's pretty decent, right? If I just say, okay, I'm going to just base it on direct labor hours, well, that hurts. Why? I have 2,000 direct labor hours. I have $50 for direct labor hours. That's $100,000. So I'm way over costing, right? But then if I do it based on machine hours, what happens? I way under cost. Okay? So by breaking it up, yes, it's in the middle, but that's what we really want to be, it's in the middle. We don't want to overcost, we don't want to undercost. We want to get as close to the actual number as we can. That $100,000 is going to cost us a lot of money because why? We're not going to be able to sell the products, or we don't think we can sell at a proper price. The $48,000 is going to cost us money. Why? Because we're selling products at a too low a price. Okay. So here's the example. So let's look at our simple lens and complex lens case. And this is actually in the book. So in this case, we are making 60,000 units, or 60,000, is this 60,000 direct labor hours? Anybody?
Yeah, it's direct and labor hours for 60,000.
Oh, 60,000 units, okay. And make 15, okay, I get it now. All right, so we're gonna be making 60,000 simple lenses and 15,000 complex lenses. We have direct materials, direct manufacturing labor, and indirect costs. So we have 1.125 million, divide by 60,000. My cost per unit is 18,750. Direct labor is $10 per unit, and my indirect is $30. If I do this, now the cost that involves in the complex lenses, we have 675 divided by 40, 15,000 gives me 45, 13, and 39. So total cost per unit is $97. So, and then of course, if I add these together, I have a total cost for everything of $4,980,000. So, how do we decide if this actually is making sense? We go back to our 5 steps of decision making that I told you at the very beginning that we would be using the entire time, right? Okay, so first identify the problems and uncertainties. So what is the problems and uncertainties? So basically what they're trying to do is determine, are they pricing these lenses at a right price? Because I think what happened in this example was that a competitor came in and said that they can sell this to their their buyer for a lower price, and so the buyer has gone to this company to say, hey, can you lower a price? And so now they've got to really dig into the numbers and see, because according to them, they can't lower the price. So what we're doing is trying to break up the cost, get more drilled down to the actual lenses to determine, hey, can we lower the price of these lenses? So possible loss of the business. So that's the problem, is the possible loss. Obtain information. We're analyzing and evaluate design, manufacturing, distribution, operation for the lens. Make predictions, and basically obtain a better cost estimate for the S3 lens. And should we bid or not? So basically what we're doing in this example is trying to determine, can we make a bid for this, or should we just walk away from this business? And then implement the decision, perform and learn. So using those 5 steps, how do we do that? Now, ABC basically means we're going to be dividing the cost based on activity. Okay? So in this case, we have design activity, we have mold machine setup activity, mold machine operations activity, shipment setup activity, distribution activity, and administration activity. And they have the indirect cost pool for each one of those. In the way that we've been doing it before, what would we do? Group everything together, get a single rate, and then apply the cost, right? Well, in activity-based costing, we're breaking these up into separate things. So in each one, we have our cost allocation base. What is the cost allocation base? That is what drives the cost in that particular item, okay? So in design activity, we're going to do 100 parts per square foot, okay? Or parts square feet. In the setup activity, we're going to have 2,000 setup hours. Molding machine hours, shipment is the number of shipments. Distribution activity would be the cubic feet delivered. And then administration activity will be the direct manufacturing labor hours, is how we're going to use. These are the activity bases. So how do I get the cost per unit? I take the amount of the activity base. So in the first one, we have 100 parts square feet. Take that 100, divide it into the 450, and I'm going to be charging each item $4,500 per part square foot. Okay? And I do that for each one. For setup hours, I'm going to take, I have a total of 2,000 setup hours, a total cost of $300,000. I'm going to take that 300 divided by 2, and I get $100 per setup hour. So for every setup hour I have for a particular item, I'm going to charge it $150 per setup item, or per setup hour. Okay? Same thing with machine molding. We have a total of 12,750 machine hours. Take that and divide it into 637.5. So every item, for every molding machine item that item has, it's going to get $50 worth of costs. And then shipment, every shipment they have for that particular item will get $405. How much, based on how much we delivered, based on cubic foot, we'll get $5.80. And then based on the manufacturing overhead, direct machine manufacturing labor hour, it's going to get $6.42. Okay? So it's a little bit more detailed, but why? We're wanting to really knuckle down on the costs. Okay? Then of course, what? The direct materials and the direct labor, that's easy to determine, right? It's just the indirect cost that we're dealing with. I'm going to trip. All right. So the next one is just basically a pretty little spreadsheet, giving you the same information. We have budget direct indirect costs for each of these 7 items. We have the quantity of the allocation base, and then the rate, the indirect rate. And that's the rate you're going to use to determine the cost. Okay?
Those are all indirect costs, right?
Yeah. Because direct costs, remember, that doesn't matter. We apply the direct costs for what they are. We don't have any kind of rates for those. All right. So let's take a look at this. So we have simple lens and we have complex lens. Direct materials, direct labor, direct mold cleaning and maintenance costs, all the direct costs, that stays the same as before, okay? Because direct is direct and it's applied no matter what. What changes is the indirect. If you go back to the thing with the indirect, that's what changes. We had one rate for indirect and we allocated the rate based on that, right? But when we do ABC production or ABC costing, we are going to break it down by items. So we have 30 square feet or 30 parts square foot for the S3, the simple lens. We have 70 parts square foot for the complex lens. So that means what? I'm going to take the 30 times the 450 or 4,500. So the indirect cost for that is $135,000. Okay, and 315 for the complex lens. But I do the same thing, getting the cost per unit. I take the 60,000 divided into the 135. That's how I get the $2.25. Same thing here. I took the 70 parts square feet times the $4,500. That's how I get the $315,000. I I take that number divided by 15,000, I get $40 or $21 per unit. And we always tie back, so we know there was $450,000 in costs, and now I've allocated those costs based on the square footage. Okay? Does everybody understand how we do that?
The numbers that are over here on the,
Uh-huh.
those
Okay.
are the numbers you can get.
Yes. You're always going to be given, those type of numbers.
It's everything else.
Yeah. Okay, you're going to be given this, if you're going to break it down by these 7 items, each one will tell you exactly how many hours or whatever it is based off of. It's going to give you that information. You got to use that information to be able to allocate the costs. So if we go back to the beginning, the screen before, we had $450,000 that we have to allocate on the 2 different lenses. Before, what would we have done? It would have been included in the big picture and then allocated based on that. Well, now we broke it down to 450, and based on the square part of the part square feet for each unit, that's how we break down the 450. Does everybody understand that? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Set up molding machines. Well, what did we know? We have a total of $300,000 we have to allocate, right? So based on this, for the lens, simple lens, it takes 500 setup hours, okay, for that department. And for the complex lens, it takes 1,500 setup hours. So I'm going to take that 500 divided by 150, which is the rate I got from the previous screen. If you go back here, we determined what? We had a total of 2,000 setup hours, total cost of 300,000. Divided the 300 by 2, and I got the 150 per hour. That's the rate I do. If you go back on this screen, what happens? We broke it down by, we have a total setup hours of 2,000, okay? 500 goes to the simple, 1,500 goes to the complex. And then based on the rate from the screen before, which is 150, I take the 500 times 150, I get 75,000. Take the 1,500 times 150, I get 225,000. And then my cost per unit, I take the 75 divided by 60, and I get $1.25. I take the 225 divided by 15,000, and I get $15 per unit. Okay? So we're tying back and forth. Just that's the easy way to remember is I've got to come up with this. This is the number. I got to break those numbers down. And they tie back to each other at all times. Okay? So you do that to each one of these. We have total indirect costs of $2.115 million, which we have spread out. So now my cost per unit for the simple lens is $49.98. The complex lens is now $132. That's a big difference, isn't it? We go back, see if it does that. If we go back to the very beginning, look at those costs that we had allocated before. All right, $58.75 for the simple, $97 for the complex. Now, when we do ABC costing, what happens? We were over allocating the simple by what, $7, $8, $9, and under allocating by over $30 for the complex lens. That's a big issue, isn't it? So what does that tell you what they were doing? They were undercharging for simple and overcharging for complex. We're not charging enough for complex. We're charging too much for simple. Okay?
It's the better there. It's over at 7 on the one.
Mm-hmm.
This 136 is how much it is actually.
Yeah. All right. So, direct costs didn't change, did they? Well, they did throw in the direct mold cleaning and maintenance labor, okay? That's the difference there. But they decided to get more specific on that. Indirect costs, we had the single cost pool, allocating using direct machine hours or direct manufacturing hours. In the ABC system, we had 7 different things. So my total indirect costs, basically the difference between these is going to be the difference because they reallocated the type of direct cost they had here. My indirect cost here is higher than here. You notice the difference, these two net, okay? That's the only difference there. Now, total cost assigned to simple 3 lens, or the simple lens, we have 3.5 million based on the single rate. And we have 2.9 million, a difference of over $500,000. So we were over costing the simple lens by almost $500,000. My cost per unit, I was over costing the simple lens by $8.77. So that means what? I was charging too much for it, and so I could be more competitive. So if my competitor who has come in at a lower price, it's justified, isn't it? You know, and I could possibly lower my price to match it or get close to it because I'm just going, hey, guess what? I don't, you know, my costs aren't as high as I thought they were. And so what was happening with the total cost for the complex lens, I was way under costing. I have 500,000 over cost based on this. And so my difference here is I was allocating $35.07 too much or too less onto this complex lens. So using this information, what would the producer think? What, you know, if you look at this information, what are some of the things they would come out when they're analyzing this?
C3.
Uh-huh.
They actually charge less than the competition they would get.
Okay.
Five.
Yeah. So the complex lens, you know, they might be selling a lot of them because they're under costing, right? So what's happening is their cost is too low, and so it's not as profitable as they thought it was. Whereas they're over costing for the simple lens, and they could lose business on, because what happens when, you know, a competitor comes in? You know, they can't match it. So, all right, each method is mathematically correct. I mean, you know, if you look at the math of each problem, it's correct. You know, we divide it, you know, based on hours, we get a rate, and that's good. Yeah, each method is acceptable. So if you don't want to get as detailed as you possibly can, you don't have to. Each method yields a different cost figure, which will lead to different gross margin calculations, which will lead to differences in other decisions such as pricing. Okay, so on the complex, what will I probably decide? I will probably be saying, you know what, I need to charge more for this. And it could cost me some business, right? But that's okay because I found out that my costs are a lot higher than what I thought they were. Only overhead is involved. Total cost for the entire firm remain the same. They're just allocated differently to the cost objects within the firm. So if you notice that the bottom line on every single one of these items that we did was exactly the same. I just made the numbers change a little bit. Kind of like when we did the problem in chapter 17, where we did it based on weighted average and then we did it based on FIFO. I got the same bottom number, didn't I? But it changed based on the method that I did. So this changes, but I still get to the same result. All right. Selection of appropriate method and drivers should be based on experience, industry practices, as well as cost-benefit analysis for each option under consideration. So you might want to see what is the industry doing, and you know, do you want to follow the industry or do you not want to follow the industry? So it just really depends on what your philosophy is and what's going on with the the world in general, your world in general, on what you were doing. Now, personally, I would like to ABC because why? I want to drive my costs as close as possible, right? But then again, I might not have the capabilities or the knowledge to do something like that. Or it might be too ineffective, too cost prohibitive, that's what I'm trying to say, to be able to drive down those costs to that specific item. Okay? That's why she can really talk to us about this, because that's what she does. So, all right, so ABC versus simple. ABC is generally perceived to produce superior costing figures due to the use of multiple drivers across multiple levels. We're driving down to very specifics. So it is generally observed as a better way of doing things. ABC is only as good as the drivers selected in their actual relationship to cost. Poorly chosen drivers will produce inaccurate costs even in ABC. So it always starts at the beginning. If I have something that is really machine labor or machine hour driven, but I base it on labor costs, that doesn't make sense, right? What is driving the cost? When you're doing these kind of analysis, you got to look, what is driving the cost of that particular cost and base it on that. So if I'm saying, it's a producing car, well, cars nowadays are machine made, right? So I want to do that particular item as the machine hours, because the labor hours wouldn't tell me anything. Okay, just like when you're making a quilt, it's not machine hours, it's labor hours, right? Okay, so if I'm making a quilt and I'm trying to decide how much does this quilt cost me, I take in materials, I take in my time, and I incorporate that. I don't care about the machine and how long the machine lasts, because that has no effect on the cost of this item. Okay? All right, using ABC does not guarantee more accurate costs. I mean, anything we do, it's really subjective. So, we could think we're doing better, but in reality, we're not. Okay? I'm trying to follow. All right, signals that suggest that ABC implementation could help a firm. So if you're a firm who's trying to decide, should I just do my simple way of doing things, or should I try to drive down the cost more accurately? Okay, so significant amounts of indirect costs are allocated using only one or two cost pools. So if I'm getting to a point where most of my costs are going indirect and not direct, and it's over, say if I have, pre-production, production, post-production, inspection, if I start having a lot of different hands in the pot type thing, then I want to really look at those costs and say, okay, what is actually driving these costs? So if I'm starting to get a lot of different hands in the pot, then I want to look at ABC. All or most indirect costs are identified as output unit cost level costs. Products make diverse demands on resources because of volume, process steps, batch size, and complexity. So if I have a product, it's different, say, a soft drink product to a cereal product, or, a widget to a widget. So I really have to look and see, what are my products doing? Products that a company is well suited to make show small profits, whereas products that a company is less suited to make shows large profits. So it helps you determine, what can I make at a good price? I might think, hey, I'm making a lot of money on this one, but in reality, I'm not. I'm not designing. That's what happened with this one. They thought the complex lens was the best option for them, and so they concentrated their resources on the complex lens. In reality, what was happening, they're losing money on it. Whereas the simple lens was more their thing to do. Okay? So like at our CPA firm, what is our thing to do? It's taxes, right? It's not audits, and we don't want to do audit. because that just isn't within our knowledge base. To do an audit for us, would take probably 2 times as much time as a firm who specializes in audits. If you go to cookie cutters, a haircut place for kids, what are they geared for? Kids, right? A barber shop. Who's usually going to a barber shop? Guys. Whereas girls go to a salon. You got great clips, or great clips is really good, but you got sports clips. A girl's not going to go into sports clips because why? They're not geared towards sports clips. That wouldn't be because the person who's cutting the hair at sports clips might not be a good cutter of hair of women's hair. That might not be a good thing, right? Okay? So you really have to say, okay, what are you good at and what will make you the money? All right, so what are some behavioral issues in implementing ABC? Gain the support of top management and create a sense of urgency. Create a guiding coalition of managers throughout the value chain of ABC for the ABC effort. Educate and train employees at ABC as a basis for employment empowerment. Seek small, short-run success as proof that the ABC implementation is yielding results. Recognizing that ABC is not perfect, better but calls for complex systems. All right, so if you're an accountant trying to implement ABC, what happens in the company a lot of times when you're trying to implement change? Resistance, okay? So you have to go into that situation and say, the first people that you do is you approach the top people. You say, you know what, I'm looking as the accountant, I'm looking at our costs, we want to make this company as profitable as possible, but here are some issues that I'm seeing. We're doing, our big rates, and I want to make sure that we're actually producing the right product for our company. So this is how we can do it. Always approach the top management. Involve everybody that's in the value chain, meaning from what? Research development to production to delivery to sales and so forth, and customer service. Have everybody involved in that so that everybody understands what you're trying to do. Educate and train employees in ABC. That's so important. How many times have you worked for a company that you really don't know what's going on with the company, right? And then once you know what's going on, what does that want you to do? You want to, as an employee, if you know, hey, if I do this, it better helps the company, which in turn will eventually help me out, right? One of the things one of my many jobs, I was working at Kirkland's in the mall. It's not there anymore. But one of the things our manager was always, telling us about, hey, you know what? We have this goal today, and this is where we're at now. He was always communicating with us what was going on with the company. Yeah, he was doing that so he knew his goals and get bonus. But he always made us feel that, hey, we were an important part of that company. And so that's why it's important to get the employees involved. Seek small, short-term run success as proof that the ABC implementation is yielding results. So you always want to do this on the short run. Don't say, okay, we're doing a look at this a year from now. When you're first implementing this type of system, you want to do it like a month or a quarter, so that the management can see that, hey, this is actually working. Our profit margins are going up. Our sales are going up. Things like that. They want to see those quick returns, those quick victories. They don't want to wait a year. Hit them right away with it. And then, of course, recognize that ABC is not perfect. No one's perfect in this world, right? And so you can explain, yes, this is not perfect. Nothing is going to be perfect, but we really want to drive our costs as close as possible. And that, explain to them, hey, this might be a little complex, but it's going to help us in the long run. Oops. A method of management that uses ABC as an integral part of critical decision making includes pricing and product mix decisions, cost reduction and process improvement decisions, design decisions, and planning and managing activities. So when I'm using ABC, the management here is going to use this to determine, one, pricing and product mix. In our example that we talked about today, what was it? We had complex and we had simple, all right? And by doing this, by doing the ABC, we were able to determine, hey, maybe we're producing too much of the complex and not enough of the simple. Should this be more simple versus complex, or more, which way would be better for us, and which one would be more profitable for our decisions? In the cost reduction and process improvement decisions, we can determine, okay, well, now we know we're not going to produce as much complex lenses, so we can take that resources away from the complex, put them more onto the simple, and our results will get better. Okay? Design decisions. Okay? Should we even have the complex, or should we redesign it maybe to cut some costs? Maybe there's some ways that we can design this complex as a good product, but because of the type of product it is, or the parts involved, maybe we can design it a little better to cut the costs. And then planning and managing activities. Again, it goes back to, okay, I want to produce more simple than complex. And so to allocate the resources to be able to do that. Okay? Some of the areas, the ABC can be done in healthcare. Healthcare, how could I do ABC in healthcare? What kind of departments are in a hospital? I'm sorry? A ton of different departments, okay? So, we have cleaning crews, right? We have administration, we have ICU, we have NICU, we have just the general floor. You have more labor intensive, more people on an ICU unit than you would have on a floor unit, right? So I could do it based on hours or manpower or what have you, different things like that. What about a banking? How could I use banking? Type of employee, or division of it, or even branch. Depending on the branch it is. What's are you in a high traffic area or a low traffic area? If you're low traffic, you're not going to have as many tellers as you would in a high traffic. Also, what could it drive to? Based on traffic, should I have 5 tellers or 2 tellers? First thing in the morning, 2 tellers. Lunchtime, 5 tellers. So things like that. Telecommunications.
Your radio or TV.
Mm-hmm.
You can divide it by news, sports, weather, or producers, cameramen,
Mm-hmm.
leads, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Radio, you got DJs, you have news guys.
Mm-hmm.
All that.
Yeah.
Just kind of divide it up to
Yeah. And then retailing, be probably by departments. If I, do I have a lot of people who come to my home department compared to my clothing department?
You have your sports department, you have your electronics department.
Mm-hmm.
That department.
You notice if you go into Sears, what's starting to go away? Electronics. Yeah. So maybe they did analysis and said, hey, electronics isn't where it's at for them.
Yeah,
No, they can't compete.
You can't compete with like Best Buy and big electronics.
Uh-huh. So if they had looked at the big picture, they could have probably, say, oh, we're doing great. But if they drive it down to the electronics department,
There aren't as many TVs and,
Yeah.
and DVD players and all that.
yeah. And so what's happening is they're going away. Transportation. What type of transportation you have, where you're going, what is the requirements of what you need.
That could be divided into a lot of things, especially if if it's, city buses or,
Mm-hmm.
a cab company,
Exactly. A city bus is a really good example because what's the big talk? You know, how far up from Indianapolis does the bus go? 96th Street. That's as far as it
Well, they're
goes.
supposed to be going up to have a bus that goes all the way up to Carmel and around back through Zionsville and then through back down.
Yeah. And so what they would do is take a look and see what are the costs and what are the possibilities of someone actually using that, and then they combine routes a lot of times. If you've ever, driven the bus, rode the bus system, they'll maybe combine routes because why? Because maybe one route isn't needed anymore because they're not getting there very many people and so forth. All right, so you are an owner manager of a dance studio and are considering offering beginner jazz class for a reduced rate. You believe that once your students start jazz dancing, they'll be hooked and will continue with the classes at your regular price. You aren't sure how to price the discounted beginners class and have gathered the following information. We have direct costs of $95 and direct studio costs of $140,000. Number of classes 20 per week for 50 weeks. The intro 5 per week for 50 weeks and anticipated number of students. Okay, so really you would take this information and really drive down to help you determine, okay, what are my costs? Well, $95 is the flat out cost, right? So then what do I have? I have anticipated number of classes at $20 per week, right? Or 20 per week, so that's 50 weeks. We used to have 20 times 50. We have a total of 1,000 classes, right? This needs to go away. Okay, so 5 per week. We have 5 times the 50. That's 250. Okay, so if I have 1,000 per week, I have the 140 divided by 1,000. That gives me what? 140. We have the $95 per unit class. So in reality, I should be costing at least what? $235. 1,000. I took the 20 times the 50. We have number of total classes of 20 classes per week at 50 weeks. Okay. I don't want to.
Yeah, I see that says annual.
Yeah.
That's where I was like.
Yeah, I don't want to say 5 and 50. That only gives me 200, and then or 250, and then if I divide that, that's going to be a huge cost. And be cost, not I couldn't do it.
Right.
And so I have to get total classes was 20 per week, 50 weeks. That's 1,000 classes. So 140 divided by 1,000, that means it's going to be $140 per class, plus the 95 of direct costs. And so my indirect costs and my direct costs are going to be at least $235 per unit.
So you're saying that you should at least charge $235
And that was just to be break even.
for the class, and that's the regular price. The
Uh-huh.
235 is the regular price,
Yeah,
and the 95 is the discount price.
No, that's
the direct costs.
That's your cost.
Okay, direct
Yeah.
cost.
So to break even, I would have to say, okay, 235 is my lowest point I need to get
35 per class.
per class. Yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah. Well-
35 per class, 235 per student.
It's and then we would divide the 235 by 20, and I would get what?
That's what those kind of things.
Yeah, I got 1175.
$11.75?
Yes.
Well, that's a lot better.
Oh, yeah, because I was like, that's a little high.
That's
Yeah.
per student per class.
Yeah.
And then, so each student would pay $11.75 per class.
That would be,
Because that 235.
yeah,
Real
yeah.
high, 75 per class per
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
1175.
yeah, that looks much better.
Yeah, I was like, that's 235
That
is a little
235 is
high.
high.
All right, so anticipated number for jazz, number of
Yeah.
students for jazz class. So 1175 would be my break-even point. So,
Per student per week.
yeah. Okay, so now what would I do? Do I call, so then you have to look at it, okay, 1175 is my break even. Do I lose a little money to start these kids out, knowing that on the back end, if they continue, then I could jack it up, say $20 per class. Should I say $10 for this introductory class and then I lose a little money, but then, they continue, they love it, they continue, I charge them $20. Am I willing to take that loss up front? Knowing if I break it down like this, then I know exactly what my cost per student is. And that helps you analyze, okay, now if I just want to break even, 1175, that's what I got to do. Or do I want to lose a little money knowing that in the future I could gain a lot more money? Okay, so that's what the process is here. Now, of course, you wouldn't want to lose a whole lot,
Seems you could charge them $12 per class and then turn it up, but they're still gonna say, no, I'm just getting a good deal. And you're not gonna lose it.
Yeah, you just stay around
Yeah.
for about
Yeah,
class. And if you can get that extra, so you more than break even.
Yeah. So that was the big picture. That would have been what we've done before. Then what we could do on a bit, more detail analysis, what we would do: studio rental, 70,000. We have your salary of 40,000, utilities of 55,000, office staff of 12, instructor benefits, cleaning services, refreshments. So in each one of these, we would determine, okay, what is my cost driver for each item, and then turn around and break it down even more. So this is the big picture, the 1175. But could we go even further? Could we drive this even down? So maybe $10 could be reasonable for this particular class. So big picture, I would say, okay, I have to do 1175. I thought I could maybe charge them $10. I would need to go to ABC, driving down more specifics, for this to determine, hey, can I get this cost down to $10? And can I do it? Okay. So big picture, 1175. More detailed picture, I could be driving it even further. And these were determined, okay, what is the allocation base for each one of these? All right, any questions? How's everybody feeling about ABC? Not too bad? All right, so your homework assignment with ABC. Again, you have 2 questions in the book. We have 520 and 525.
But on 20, you'll
Yeah. On 20, we only have to do 1 and 2. I only give you spaces for 1 and 2. All right, so in 20, we're doing plant-wide department and activity-based rates. And so if you look at your homework assignment, your spreadsheet here, you're going to determine, okay, my direct materials for the forming, the assembly, and the total, the direct labor. Of course, that is always going to be no matter what, right? And then the budgeted overhead rates. Well, forming department setup is driven by what? Setup costs for each input may vary in number of batches processed. Okay, so they give you the batches for each one of these, and you take that number and divide it into the cost for the overhead rates for these, okay?
What's that again?
You take the batches, like in the forming department, I have 40 trophies, all right? And to determine your overhead rate, is it based off of?
But the setup, they give you the setup.
Yeah.
So,
Setup costs, okay. Calculate the budgeted cost of trophies in class based on a single rate plant-wide rate, overhead rate, if the total overhead is allocated based on total direct costs, all right? And then calculate the budgeted cost of trophies and plaques based on department overhead rates or allocated based on direct manufacturing labor costs of the forming department, and similarly is overhead based on direct costs of the assembly. So in the first one, we have the big picture. And so what would we do? Let me take a look here. This is it's 20, right?
That's
There it is. All right. So in the first one, we have what? All right. So the first top here is basically you're just copying the top right here. So the 26, the 22, and the 32, 1, and the 18,000. Okay? And then the bottom part of it, what you have to determine, where is it? Oh, okay, I see what they're doing. So basically on the first top part here, you're just taking the information and plugging it in. Okay? The bottom part is where you have to determine the rates. So the budgeted overhead rate is basically the overhead costs of all 4 departments divided by the total cost that you get up here. Okay? So the first part of it is you're just you're just listing the information that's in the book and you're coming to a total cost. Okay? And then the second part here is you're listing the information here. And I gave you all the lines to do it and the total direct cost, your budgeted overhead rate. So you got to fill in this information first to get the budgeted overhead rate. So you're going to fill in this information. This is the division. This is the numerator or denominator. This is the numerator. This is the denominator. That's the rate. Okay? The rate is at the top. The numbers are at the bottom. So you got to fill in the bottom numbers to get the rate at the top. Okay? And then the similar thing in part B, yeah. And so you're just plugging in numbers on all that. And then the budget, so on the budget overhead forming department, what do? You take the budgeted forming department overhead costs, which is the 24,000, and divide it by the direct manufacturing labor for the forming. Because it's based on what it's, whatever it's based on, that's in the denominator. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Overhead costs are in the top. What it's based on is on the bottom. So in part B, it's based on, for the forming department, it's based on the manufacturing labor costs. And the assembly cost of the department, it's based on direct costs. Okay. If you have any questions on any of these, just, fill in the numbers you can, send it over to me, have me review it. Don't wait until next Tuesday to do this. Okay? And again, next week what we'll do in class is we'll go over the homework, go over anything you guys have questions on. So start reviewing over the next few days about everything that we covered in between the two tests. So we're looking at what? We're looking at chapters 4, 17, and 5. 4, 17, and 5 is what test number 2 is on.
Is it gonna be similar setup as the last test?
Yes.
Bunch of multiple choices
Mhm.
and a couple, better figure it out.
Well, there's more, there was quite a few figured out in the last one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but a lot of them are multiple choice where you can go look at.
You
think
can,
I think I'm close to the number, just,
Yeah.
So the test is very similar. We'll talk more about the text next week, but just know, start looking at chapters 4, 5, and 17 for any questions. And again, we'll go over it next week. We'll go over all the homework next week to make sure you understand it, and we'll go from there. Any questions? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Try to get all the homework done before class next week, and then that way we can go through it, thoroughly in class. Bring in copies of your past homework from chapters 4 and 17, so you understand where you made mistakes at. We can go over those. And then, of course, have the PowerPoints for you that you can write notes on. You're going to be given those for the test, so you can have those for the test. So, all right, any questions? All right. So you guys have a wonderful night, a wonderful weekend. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.